Hi, I'm David Shearman, and welcome to Politically Speaking. It's a new season for Politically Speaking, and who better to kick off our first show with than Alex Ruff, the MP for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. Alex, good to see you again.
Good to see you, David. It's great to be back.
Yes, we're into September. We're into that lovely fall balmy weather that we expect and look forward to. Alex, have you got yourself a farmer's tan yet?
Oh, there's a little bit of it from earlier on, more along the sock line more than anything. I think it's the most noticeable tan. It's not like I'm running around with my shirt off too much, David, but you can definitely notice it if I'm wearing sandals or something. Which pretty much sandal season's over, but I didn't wear had my socks on pretty much all summer for all the different events. But yeah, it's the weather is you can feel it at night more. I mean, it's still gorgeous day to day, but obviously you can tell fall's coming.
Yes, and I dare I say it, but fall is when you get back to your Ottawa portion of work, which we'll touch on later, but it's indicative that the seasons are turning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what did you do this summer? I mean, obviously you weren't out haying, but well, maybe you were, but what did you do this summer?
Well, look, in a lot of ways, it was maybe a little bit tamer summer than some summers. Obviously, since I've been elected, we've been dealing with minority parliaments, so you always got to be ready to go. But having just gone through a spring election, the first time I've done one of them, we knew we weren't going back to the polls this summer or early fall yet. So ultimately, it did allow a little bit more, a lower level of, I guess, heightened, awareness or not awareness, preparedness, because we knew we just gone through the process. But in reality, the summer kicks off with Canada Day, and again, another sort of 400 or 500 kilometer day on the road. I know myself and Mr. Vickers, we end up doing a lot of the same stuff and all over the riding. Got up the peninsula the first time this time to I believe it was, where was I? Pikes Bay or somewhere up there. I can't even remember now. Well, it was the first time. Was that unbelievable turnout? Gorgeous, beautiful being on the bay there. I mean, obviously, doing the Georgian Bluffs and Meaford. There's just so many beautiful spots that you get to see on Canada Day, and we were blessed with another beautiful day of that. So that you kick right into that, and so that and then there's events going on around that Canada Day frame, right into my sort of annual MP constituency barbecue down in Chesley. Another great turnout, and then just sort of normal stuff, keeping busy with my family and my daughter as well. She's swimming lessons and camps and moving around and getting caught up with constituency. I spent a lot of time. I do those mail outs on a regular basis. Normally, I think I average about every 2 months, but we had put out a couple there even since the election occurred. And the first one I put out was what are the number one federal priority for everybody in the riding. And while the problem with that is when there's not yes, no questions, it's a lot easier to read them and reply to them when it's just somebody's answer to two questions, yes or no, or unsure. When you're asking for feedback in written format, it takes a lot longer. So, I mean, it took me the better part of a few weeks to get through those literally hundreds of letters and write responses to everybody to get them back. And then obviously, even though Parliament was adjourned, especially the last few weeks, we've been quite busy with uh, deliberating internally within the Conservative caucus on some important issues that we envision are top of mind to address the ongoing concerns and the feedback that I've been hearing, but my colleagues have been hearing across the country. So there's been a few announcements already publicly about the intent that we intend to push with the Liberal government when Parliament returns to encourage them to put the legislation forward. And if not, I know we have private members' bills from some of my colleagues that are lucky enough to be up in the order of precedence that they have to table their bills in the first few weeks back. And so there's pressure for them to get that. So from everything to dealing with justice and bail reform to immigration challenges, etc. So we can get into that in a bit more detail later in the show. But just that doesn't stop either. So we've got lots going on that way, and it's always great to get out and recognize those celebratory sort of milestones too. Lots of people with some pretty incredible birthdays or have done something incredible for the community, and to get out and attend those type events too. So it just sort of blurs by, but it went faster than I'd like for sure.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret, Alex. It was a short summer.
Yeah.
It, chronologically, I finally figured it out about Labor Day, that because Labor Day was so early this year, it felt like, and it was in fact a short summer. And because Canada Day ended up almost the middle of the week, it just very different. Now the good news is next summer, Labor Day is at the is as late as it can be, so we don't have to worry as much. It'll
Oh, cool.
be a long summer as long as it doesn't snow. It may be a long summer anyway, but who
Yeah.
knows? Um, One of the things we talked about on the show is the coronation medal presentation, and I participated in one of those presentations. But you have had a number of presentations which have kind of been left for various circumstances. Are those finished now?
They're all done. I've been meaning, and I should actually, it's a good reminder, David. I will bug my staff. I reminded them there about a week ago to help draft up, and I want to put out a final press release sort of indicating here's the list of the 30 recipients, sort of plus one. I actually attended one where I was involved in presenting up at the hospital to somebody that wasn't one of the 30 I was given to present to very deserving constituents. It was actually somebody that just asked me to attend and be the presenter. So, but I got the final three done, um, that needed to be done sort of post that big celebration. So I had to go to, one individual's work up on Nawash, another one to attend the person's home because of just some mobility challenges. And obviously at my annual barbecue too, I got to present one to the late Bob Johnson's family. Because Bob unfortunately was nominated, awarded the King's Coronation Medal, but unfortunately passed since that nomination process. So he was still awarded it posthumously. So very well deserving, but just incredible privilege to be allowed to sort of shepherd that process. But again, the biggest challenge with any of these type of community recognitions is narrowing it down to the sort of the 30 most deserving, because that's not even the right moniker, because there's way more people deserving. And I think I mentioned this on the show before, when originally I was allocated, I believe, 20, and then they came back late December of last year and said, if we have some extras, are you interested in any extras? And it's like, how many do you want? I said, all of them. And so ultimately I was able to get 10 more here for the people of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. And so it was really a privilege to present them. So yeah, it's I'll get a list out there so it's sort of a consolidated list of all 30. But again, David, appreciate the help you did emceeing that event that we did here in Owen Sound, that did the vast chunk of them, because it made it a lot easier. Thank you so much.
Well, it was my privilege. And the thing I learned about those coronation medals is there are some extraordinary people among us. They're your neighbors, they're your friends, they maybe even be family. But there are a lot of extraordinary people who have done incredible things for the community, for their country, for if who are among us, who walk among us, as the expression goes. And it is something I think, dare I say, to be proud of, because we Canadians kind of poo-poo ourselves. But hey, this is something we should take pride in, because these are incredible people with wonderful stories. There's probably a book there, Alex.
Yeah,
Somebody will
no,
write it.
yeah, no, absolutely. There's great stories behind every single one of these well deserving recipients.
Yeah. Now you referred to the caucus meeting, and one of the um, political subtexts that has been playing out over the summer, of course, has been Mr. Poilievre's election out west. And you've said in the past you were not involved in any campaigning, you weren't asked anything like that. But I'm sure as caucus, you've got now that how shall I say it? Now that the air has cleared because Mr. Puleva was reelected or was elected in his new riding, um, that now you can begin to make plans. Is that reasonable?
Well, I pushed back that the plans were being made. Mr. Polyev was the leader. That never changed. He
No.
had the party, according to our constitution, he will face a leadership review at the next national policy convention that's taking place at the end of January in Calgary. So that's when the grassroots membership of the party and the delegates that get selected from each of the riding associations across the country, we will have the option of sending myself, the president of our local riding association, plus 10 additional delegates to go represent the conservative membership here in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. Every riding gets that same opportunity, and obviously that's when Mr. Polyev will go through a leadership review. So the fact that he wasn't in the House for those first few weeks back in January, obviously, created a bit of a wrinkle, but it didn't change anything. It's actually quite frequent that normally at the start of their when somebody wins the leadership, let's look at the NDP, for example. They're going through a leadership race that's just sort of kicked off, and they haven't made any. I don't know if any of the candidates have made their official sort of announcement. I think there's one that sort of indicated he will. There's rumors that at least two more, including Heather McPherson, who's the only one that I'm tracking that's a certain sitting MP. But if it's one of the other two that becomes the new leader of the NDP party, well, they're not going to have a seat in the House of Commons either, right? So they'll either have to wait till a by-election occurs, somebody steps down and run in that riding, or they won't even be in the House until the next election, right? So my point is that not having your leader in there is just it's not abnormal to some extent. It's abnormal for Mr. Polyev having been a successfully elected for 21 years out of the riding of Carleton. But ultimately now he was reelected with over 80% of the vote in Battle River Crowfoot. So he's back, and that means he can just get back. It'll make his job a lot easier in some ways to hold Mr. Prime Minister Carney and the Liberal government to account, because ultimately, to remind your viewers out there, is that is what the role, as according to the Parliament of Canada Act, is for the opposition parties. It's to hold the government to account, to bring forth the best legislation possible for all Canadians. So we're the checks and balances part of the sort of Parliament. So it's and as Mr. Polyev has said countless times publicly, it's our job not just only to oppose, but it's to propose. And he's stated quite clearly in public statements as recently as just a few days ago that we're going to come forward with solutions. I already sort of indicated some of them from the caucus work that we've done, that we have private members' bills that will be getting tabled, that the government can choose to basically steal, copy, plagiarize, and utilize in order to address some of these important issues that Canadians are facing.
Yeah, I think there was I won't say a grievous error, but there's been it's been a bit misleading that this was an unusual circumstance. It's not. It's the way where our parliamentary democracy works. Um, and I mean, the Ontario Liberals had the same issue, are sitting in the same place right now. Their leader is not a member, not a seating member in the House. Okay.
Yep.
It, it's it's not a good analogy, but I'd say it's kind of like boxing with one hand tied behind your back, but because you can't be on the floor, but you can be in the lobby. And so Mr. certainly Mr. Pulav was making himself known and over the summer, and we certainly saw his presence. And like I say, he's still leader. He's still
Yep.
leader. And so the caucus has planned legislation or talking about legislation. Um, well, one of the things that I think everyone is waiting for is the budget. That's the big sort of unknown, if I can use that word, because that we're getting hints, rumors, we're getting the expression is telegraphing, messages from the government, but we won't know until the budget comes down mostly. So, um, what do you think we will see in the budget? Any ideas, any thoughts, any even
Well,
guesses?
yeah, I mean, the government's already telegraphed, as you said, a number of things. So one of the key ones, obviously, is the commitment to get to 2% of GDP spending on national defense. So therefore, how they're going to go about that and whether they're capable of actually getting there is they've said really by early next year. Um, I'm somewhat cynical. I'm encouraged that the fact that the Prime Minister has signaled this and the Minister McGuinty. However, ultimately the proof will be in the pudding. But that's obviously expensive, right? To basically increase by, I think they were 1.3-ish or something percent last year. So to increase that by another 0.7% of the GDP is still, you're talking, $20 billion, I believe, ballpark of additional spending that needs to occur. A lot of that's going to take place in obviously the pay raise that's now been clarified just at the sort of the end of the start of the summer. Because originally I think the minister came out and said it was 20% blanket pay raise. No, it's 20% for the lower ranks, 13% for sort of the middle ranks, and an 8% increase for the senior ranks, which is fine. At least that clarity's there because it wasn't isn't how it was initially announced. But that costs money. Like your biggest expense in any organization, I don't care if it's the federal bureaucracy, federal government, or you're running your own business. Your biggest expense most of the time is your people, right? And rightfully so. So that does come with I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. The other big issue, obviously, that we're going to see in the budget is the government just announced, I believe, last week after their cabinet meeting was a $5 billion sort of, I don't want to say emergency fund, but a fund to deal with the tariffs and the impacts that that's having on industry. So it's a sort of a 5 billion industrial sort of emergency fund. So I think that's going to do. But the rumors on the street, and we'll see what happens, is that based on the election platform that Mr. Carney ran on, actually shows that the deficit this year will likely be double what Mr. Trudeau had initially forecasted. So we're talking the potential to see a $90 billion-ish deficit for this year when the budget gets tabled here in the coming weeks, which I think, as much as it was talked about, it was talked about only in the last week of the election because I don't believe they released their costed platform until the last week. It'll be interesting to see how many Canadians are going, whoa, how much money are you spending? And so at the same time, they're indicating that they are looking for cost saving measures because that is something Mr. Carney ran on. So we'll see what happens, right? Like ultimately, it's all, there's been, as I said, some of the big ticket items that I think will account for a lot of it is the increase to defense spending and dealing with the impacted industries and sectors based on the ongoing complications with the U.S. and the tariffs.
Yeah, I think you're bang on there. The defense spending is frightful. But at the same time, I understand that one of the big problems Canada has had, and you're probably more familiar than I am, is defense procurement. That's been a mess for probably 2 or 3 decades. And
Three or four
but
decades. 3 or 4
well,
decades.
like I said, you know this stuff. Um, but the defense procurement apparently is being streamlined. But again, proof of the pudding will be in the eating. So,
And it's needed. It's really needed. The world's more volatile than ever. As we're talking here, just last night, Russia invaded Polish airspace. Poland invoked Article 4 of NATO, and so there's been condemnation across the NATO countries against Mr. Putin and the drones that were flown into Polish airspace that were shot down. But I mean, it's just an example of just that sort of escalation by Mr. Putin and Russia in this illegal invasion of Ukraine. And it just, I think, emphasizes or re-emphasizes the criticality of our needed support and spending. Because to be frank, my take on it is the world is actually more volatile and more dangerous than it's been in decades. So we need to be ready for it, and especially in light of the unpredictability of what's going on south of the border, and as the U.S. sort of pulls back on their traditional role of sort of being the world police. It comes with somebody's got to fill that void, and it means like-minded democracies like Canada has to sort of pull up their socks. So as I said, I'm supportive of the increase in spending. We'll just see, but in order to do that, without compromising, Canada's great social programs, is obviously the need to get our economy flowing again. So we'll see if any of the announcements in the budget. I know read this morning that the government's apparently coming out with a list maybe later this week yet, even before Parliament returns, of finally of which projects, because so far the only thing Prime Minister Carney's done is talked about doing important and big national projects of the national interest, and he's talked about creating another level of bureaucracy to oversee this. But there hasn't been a single project actually formally approved and announced yet. So we'll see what happens here maybe later this week.
Yes, and I think those are the kinds of things that we just have to keep watching on because they're, uh, we're in a totally new world. I grew up in the Cold War. You probably grew up on the tail end of the Cold War. You probably served on the tail, or maybe even served on the tail end of the Cold War. Um, there we knew. It was them, it was us, it was I remember the air raid sirens. The Diefenbunker, all those kinds of things. I remember when Canada was actually a nuclear power. And we had the Army equipped with nuclear weapons, the Air Force was nuclear weapons, and the Navy was equipped with nuclear weapons. And we haven't had that since the 80s. But we're in a totally different sphere now. And, the Navy will be getting new submarines from new vendors. I mean,
Yeah, the
The
submarine
Germans,
contract's been
yeah,
announced that they've narrowed it down to either a German company or South Korean company.
yeah,
So I think, we'll see how that gets decided. I think there's certain advantages, just from my limited knowledge. I'm not on the inside anymore with the, sort of the full grasp of what's going on. But I think, both companies obviously are producing a good submarine. I think one of the advantages, I think it's the German company, is that they are sailing with a number of NATO allies already. So interoperability will be a factor that might, be more beneficial or advantageous to that contractor. At the same time, too, is I believe they don't have as many. They have space right now in their production facility to actually take orders and be able to get these submarines delivered to Canada sooner. Because right now, unfortunately, our submarine fleet, I believe, there's only one operational at this time. So that's an advantage there. Whereas I think with the South Korean company, again, from my understanding, is producing a good submarine. However, there's quite a long list of countries with orders for it. So you're talking the better part of a decade potentially before they will be able to deliver to Canada. So we'll see whatever kind of company ends up winning that contract. Uh, but the sooner the Canada makes that decision, the better off we'll be to have that certainty and know where we're going forward on a much needed capability.
and it's even icebreakers. I mean, we
We need
there
more
are
icebreakers.
we need
Yep.
more icebreakers because we've never ever since the St. Roche made the Northwest Passage journey, we really haven't had the great ability to do anything like that. We've done some, but we've got to build new icebreakers. And I gather there's a connection with there's a Finnish company that's been bought by Chantier Davy, and they're there's some kind of licensing going back and forth, and so we'll it's a whole new world with new names. With new
No,
names.
absolutely.
So we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. But that leads me to another question. You were on the National Security and Intelligence Committee of parliamentarians in the last before the House rose before the election, and you've been named again to
Yep.
that committee.
Yep, I'm back on NSICOP as we call it. So looking forward to getting back there. There was a little bit of confusion this summer because the law actually states the prime minister has to appoint, doesn't say he or she has to appoint all the membership by, I believe it's 30, no, 60 calendar days, 60 from the election, I believe. Um, they announced everybody except for, they didn't announce a single conservative MP. And there was one sort of short that I know there was some negotiation whether the conservatives were going to get another member, a third member, a third MP on the committee. We did get a senator named onto it this time for the first time since its existence, actually, and or whether it was going to be another Liberal MP. And then lo and behold, they did make the announcement just a couple of weeks ago that they formally announced that myself and my colleague Rob Morrison, the two of us that were on the committee before, I'm ex-military, he's an ex-RCMP officer. We have current top secret security clearances, and yet somehow they didn't name us for a month later. So I will be pushing them. I've already warned the sort of the system that I will be formally asking questions through the order paper question process, the written question process that I can submit to the government to ask why, right? Because it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever that the two of the members that actually are back onto it, and there was one senator that's back on it. The rest of the membership is relatively new, although the new chair, Darren Fisher, was on the committee with me for a period of the 2.5 years that I was on it, but he then became a parliamentary secretary when came off of it. Became the Minister of Veterans Affairs. That's why he came off of it about a year ago, not quite. And then he wasn't named to cabinet with Mr. with Mr. Carney. So he was now appointed as the chair. However, my point is it's very confusing to me that why the two people that have current security clearances that were members of the committee were not part of that original tranche. So again, I find it fascinating that something so easy and simple to do somehow did not occur for an extra month and a bit. So I will just ask the questions of saying, can you please explain to Canadians and why you thought it was all right to name everybody except for the conservative MPs until a month and a bit later. So anyway, we'll see how that all plays out, but I'm going to try to get answers.
Welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest is Alex Ruff, who is the MP for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. And we've been talking about summer. We've been talking about the budget. We've been talking about the upcoming session. But I wanted to ask you one question to go back to NSICOP, Alex. They, prior to the previous federal election, I believe it might have been after, the report from NSICOP was raised the question of foreign interference in this country. And having had a chance to read the redacted version, because that is public, does make interesting reading, but you got to kind of read it carefully because when redactions happen, they make incomplete sentences. So you've got to say, "Oops," okay. But that's just an editorial thing. But the point is that the recommendations are very clear, that we need to up our game as a country. Where would you see us beginning to up our game in terms of dealing with foreign interference?
So look, if you go to paragraph 168, it lays it out. I mean, as one of the authors of that report over a year and a half ago, the there's a number of issues, and I mean, I could pull it up here online fairly quickly to go through all the recommendations. So let me back up. Bill C-70, which then, funny enough, was tabled just as our report was tabled publicly and in the House. The government had it for, I believe it's 30 sitting days prior to at that point, so which worked out to about, because it was March or whatever time frame at that time, they ended up, it was into early June before it was tabled. Bill C-70 addressed a pile of the issues. That's when it talks about the foreign registry, a bunch of changes to really the CSIS Act, which allows CSIS now to share intelligence and information with non-federal government entities. So it was against the law, according to the CSIS Act, prior to Bill C-70 going through, for them to share information with the Owen Sound Police Services or with another level of government, i.e. the provincial government, or things they could always do in an extremist case of immediate risk to, life or limb, that they could then do stuff, and they had the functionality and the capabilities of doing it then, but they weren't in a normal sense, which is really where foreign interference is really dealing with. So ultimately, Bill C-70, there was a bit of pushback, but it was tabled. It had unanimous consent and was passed in record time before we rose last summer. So it addressed a number of the recommendations, not all of them. The biggest thing that I still think needs to get resolved in Canada, somewhat uniquely positioned and associated, because we're really the only country with a charter that exists the way it does in Canada. We need to be able to protect the capabilities, the sources, the techniques of where we get some of this intelligence. And so I think that's still a gap that needs to be resolved, and I'll continue to push the government to address this, because the example is there's a lot of cases of foreign interference and even some cases, stuff that's not even of the internet, like of a national concern. It's just a very serious crime. It could be dealing with criminal organizations, etc., internally, domestically, but because of the capability that was utilized or leveraged, if it came from CSIS or if it came from the Canadian Security Establishment, CSE, or if it came from an ally's capability. And this really gets fascinating when technology has changed so much. And I'm going to lead this into, because we did another report that was tabled with the Prime Minister in March on lawful intercept, because this ties to some of the changes yet that the government's trying to bring forward in Bill C-2 that was tabled, that has some privacy advocates concerned. However, we met with all of them. So I was pushing the government back in June. That report needs to be tabled publicly, because it lays out from a nonpartisan, because all the parties are represented on, I mean, not the Green, and at the time the NDP were still an official party. So we had Don Davies, who's the current interim leader of the NDP, was on that committee with me. So we wrote that report. Again, all our recommendations, that whole report is done by unanimous consent. There's never been a vote on that committee in my time on it in the last 2.5 years, and I believe the previous membership, they've never had a vote on that committee. Everything we agreed to unanimously in order to make the report. So my point is there's a lot of recommendations around in the report on lawful intercept that would help address some of the concerns that Canadians and even political parties are raising about Bill C-2 that the government's tabled, to, giving certain additional capabilities or resources or access to our law enforcement or organizations like CSIS. So until we protect that, and figure out how to address this in a court system, protect the source, and have a sort of a parallel system. And there are some that exist, but it's complicated and it's not as clear cut as it needs to be, in my opinion. We're not going to be able to address fully foreign interference, and even in some cases other types of crimes in Canada. Again, I'm not a lawyer. However, I do recommend for everybody out there, they can go to the NSICOP website and read the reports. As you said, even your comment, the redacted version, I'll tell you publicly, there the meat of everything in the redacted version is no different than what's in the unredacted version. The only thing that's in the unredacted version is specifics. There's some case files, some case studies, some details about exactly times and wins, but the meat of it has been all paraphrased and brought forward, so it reads. And as you say, the recommendations, there's nothing classified in any of the recommendations of what we're recommending to the government and the assessment that we made. So ultimately, we need to, one of the key things I think still needs to get addressed is protecting um, our sources and techniques in a court of law, so that the and again, you're presumed innocent, is still a fundamental to our thing, but it doesn't mean that if you're the one that's alleged to have committed a serious crime or something like foreign interference, you're working for another state country, it doesn't mean that you get to know exactly how we know about it. And so therefore, I think that's something that needs to get addressed. I think the next thing, and it'll be fast, and that's why I'm looking forward to the committee getting back, as we decide what we're going to do next. We have to finish off. We had done a study. Didn't quite finish it before the prorogation, or sorry, not prorogation, because we still met during prorogation, but before the election was called, finishing off a study on the role of the National Security and Intelligence Advisor. So nothing's been done. There was a mandate letter issued. Funny enough, once we called to our committee, a bunch of the NSIAs, Mr. Trudeau had released a mandate letter. It's the first time in the history of Canada that we've had one of them. We've had a version of a National Security and Intelligence Advisor since, I believe, 84 time frame, but not called exactly that. But the point is, we got to finish that study up. But the other thing I think that we could look at, that another committee can't look at through the same lens, because again, our ability to look at it from a classified perspective, is critical capabilities here in Canada, which I think are even more important considering what we talked about earlier in the show, David, with how volatile the world is, and the fact that it's not just about your traditional military threats. It's the cyber threat, it's the artificial intelligence threat, it's the quantum computing and everything that's come about. Is that in the end, you can if somebody's able, whether it's a foreign state, whether it's a terrorist organization, is able to target and shut down your power grid, in the middle of winter or in the middle of summer, right? During one of those heat waves that we had, or in the middle of a snowstorm, Canadians' lives are going to be at risk. So how do you protect your critical infrastructure, and just what more needs to be done? And I think there's lots that we could do. Again, that report would I think would be more redacted than most, in that what gets released publicly wouldn't be the specifics about, I mean, some of it's obvious, right? You look at our nuclear power facilities, reactors, like those are critical infrastructures. They're a no-brainer, but there's lots of other stuff when you're talking about our economy and the finance system, et cetera, that I think needs to be a better lens to truly make sure that the government understands, and enough pressure is being put on them, and even those of us privileged enough to get access to the information can make those recommendations to say, hey, we should be putting more resources. And funny enough, that stuff actually would all fall under NATO's new commitment that NATO signed off on, to try to get to 5% of GDP on national defense by 2035, 3.5% on key capabilities. That's your traditional military stuff, whether you're buying planes, trains, or tanks or whatever, versus the 1.5 on support services. Well, your energy infrastructure, your actual key road infrastructure to get key military capabilities to a port, all that stuff could fall under your 1.5%. So I think us doing a study on that. So I just think there's a couple quick examples of where I think we're going to be quite busy, within this next parliament. I know I'll be, what we decide to do, I don't know if that ever has been gone to a vote on that aspect of trying to figure out what we want to do and study next as a committee. But I know those are all discussions that we've had in the past and that we may look into here going forward.
Well, it's one of those lesser known but critically important functions of Parliament, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of that because it lifts up not just your work but also important work that we all need to be aware of because after all, the core of our of what we do, who we are, is our democratic systems, and if they're under threat maybe we better pay attention. Well, let's move on to another couple of issues that I wanted to raise with you, and it's one that your leader, Mr. Poilievre, has raised fairly recently, and that is immigration. And I was confused in his most recent, unless I've misunderstood, which is quite possible. But what he said was that the country needs to slow immigration, including the temporary foreign workers or temporary workers permit system. And immediately when I heard him say that, I said, but just a minute. This area depends on temporary foreign workers significantly and has for decades to harvest our crops. And so, am I confused here?
No, you're not confused, but there is a difference, right? So there
Hmm.
are some agricultural sectors that leverage the temporary foreign worker program. However, a large percentage of them actually fall under the seasonal ag worker program.
Hmm.
This proposal that's been put forward is completely, the agriculture sector is completely exempt from what Mr. Polyev and my conservative colleagues have been calling for, right? So we're not touching agriculture. We recognize that agriculture in particular is does require some additional support measures to be put in place, which includes bringing in workers from other countries. We're very dependent upon it here locally in Meaford for the orchards. In particular, there's even some cases for meat processing where some of the big meat processing plants are dependent upon it. However, we recognize there needs to be basically a separate standalone program to deal with that. The seasonal ag program already exists, but we need to cut out what Mr. Polyev has been calling for with the sort of full stop of the temporary foreign workers program because the proof's in the pudding, right? Is that the Canadian unemployment has just been going through the roof, especially with our youth. Job losses, I believe, if my numbers are correct, we had something like 106,000 losses in the last quarter or whatever with the last reporting period. At the same time, we brought in 105,000 temporary foreign workers. How does that make sense, right? When I see not so much up here, but in some of our service industries, exactly how does it make sense that a McDonald's can bring in a temporary foreign worker, um, paying them $35 an hour. They can't find a Canadian that wants to work at a restaurant for 35 bucks an hour. I have trouble believing that, right? So ultimately, this is about getting jobs for our youth, keeping our Canadians employed, and ensuring that money's staying here in Canada and not going there. So uh, ultimately, my point is to get to your point is agriculture separate. Everything else sort of needs to be definitely relooked at and paused so that we can allow Canadians to have good paying jobs here in Canada.
Hmm. Well, that's a better explanation than I've heard otherwise. So thank you. But that also raises a question, and this is more a provincial in the provincial realm than the federal realm. Um, the idea of bringing reducing provincial barriers to job changes to skilled professions moving across Canada. I think we're all agreed that's got to happen to allow people to have freedom of movement across the country and to remove those barriers for the skilled trades and professions.
Yeah, and so some of that was addressed, I believe, is it Bill C, I don't know if it was part of Bill C5 even. I get my numbers mixed up here from what was done. There was a labor and mobility aspect of that we did support the government in getting that, not only the big projects, but the labor and mobility aspect passed. The challenge there that they still haven't fully adopted, like we've had a Red Seal program in Canada for I think the better part of 40 years, which allows your sort of skilled trades like your plumbers, your electricians, et cetera, that their skill sets are recognized by all the provinces right across the country, right? So that if you're trained in some of those, you have your red seal, you're good to work in any province in Canada. What Mr. Poilievre promised or proposed over 2.5, 3 years ago, and we again, despite the Mr. Carney and the Liberals copying and stealing a pile of the other ideas, even in this last election, they still haven't fully adopted the Blue Seal program that Mr. Poilievre put forward that would help address the shortfalls from healthcare workers and the professions, right? And again, twofold there. It goes back to the previous question on immigration. When we have trained doctors and dentists and nurses from other countries driving cabs here in Canada, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So again, this does have to be done in collaboration and cooperation with the provinces and territories and the professions themselves, because ultimately it should never be politicians dictating what the qualifications are needed to do heart surgery. However, we can put pressure on the College of Physicians and Surgeons, for example, to say when you have a trained cardiac surgeon that's come in from South Africa or Ireland or whatever country they've come in from, India, that you need to get back to them within a reasonable amount of time. And I can't remember where they were pulling it up, but I believe it was something like 180 days to say you have 6 months to tell them what they're qualified to do or what additional exams they need to do or training that they require in order to be actually employed in that field. Because the last time I checked, it doesn't matter if you're a human being in South Africa or Ireland or India, your heart operates exactly the same as your heart operates when you're in Canada, right? So if you're capable of doing heart surgery in another country, you should be qualified to do it here with, again, some verification processes maybe put in place. So I think there's definitely more to be done on that labor mobility aspect and more pressure that can be put on everybody to agree. I know some of the provinces have already, are showing some great leadership. I think Nova Scotia was one of the first to sort of state, hey, we've signed off on a bunch of this different things on different skill sets. So, and again, to get to the other aspect, not just the labor mobility, but the interprovincial trade barriers to stopping these artificially sort of inflation measures, internal tariffs, for lack of better words, that makes us less competitive here to sell Canadian products right across the country. So again, part of the legislation that passed will address some of that, but I think, again, the proof will be in the pudding to see if the Liberal government can continue to show the leadership necessary to ensure that this does actually get implemented right across Canada.
Yes, I know that Ontario has announced that they have agreements with all provinces for freedom of movement for the trades. So we'll just see where this goes. But it's hey, it's I guess it's part of the whole I was going to say strange new world, but the whole new world we're living in, where we have to be able to protect ourselves, serve ourselves first, which we're not used to doing at all. Which leads me down to another question. Part of your summer work is you're out among the people, meeting them, greeting them, summer fairs, including the ones you miss, but getting out there. Um, what are you hearing about the effect of tariffs on people in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound?
So it depends on what exactly we're talking about. Obviously, and it's not just the U.S. tariffs, the Chinese tariffs on canola, for example, huge impact. Not not that we have a whole bunch of canola here in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, but it's impacting our agricultural sector. Some of the processing capabilities and stuff too are being impacted. Um, it's funny. I was just at, this morning I was talking to an individual in the sort of the auto sector, and they're actually surprisingly that they're still selling enough vehicle. I think it depends on which company you're dealing with too, depending on how much of a, Canadian manufacturing capability and where they're doing. One of the key aspects that he shared with me this morning was the used vehicle. So if it's a car or truck that was manufactured in Canada, the US, or sorry, Canada or Mexico, the resale market that they had where they could, still continue to make money and sell to the American buyers, well, that's basically dried up completely because of those tariffs. Has raised the prices that they can't sell them. So they're sitting on stock there that normally they could offload a lot faster. Um, so to be frank, there's different. It's impacted more the smaller businesses. I've heard more complaints from some of them, but they've been impacted by different things, like the Canada Post potential strikes, or when it did occur briefly. That impacts a lot of our small businesses that are dependent upon Canada Post to get their products either across the country or down to the U.S. The tariffs then, and it's actually even more with they just lifted or removed that sort of $800 and below tariff thing. So I've had some small businesses reach out for me that all of a sudden these orders that they had that used to be able to ship down to, because they're just small people. Like I think of one um, angling company in the riding that shared with me
Yes.
that he
Mhm.
he's selling so many lures down to the states to American customers, and all of a sudden, boom! Now there's a 25% or something tariff, on that. Something he can't absorb personally because their profit margins are so tiny on some of this stuff as a small business. That's all their profit, so they can't be selling them if they're going to lose their complete profit margin. So
That's called they removed the de minimis limit. Basically, that $800 exemption was called the de minimis limit, and there was a
I don't
lot
know
of,
how many of your viewers know that word, David. I think
yeah,
if you
I
tell them
know,
that
it's just one of
eight
those
hundred dollars and
trivia.
below is no
Yeah,
longer
yeah.
tariff free.
But it's interesting because I happened to buy something that was came in from the UK, and even Canada, even the CBSA is hitting up Canadians because the de minimis limit for the HST is about $100. If you're over $100, they charge you. They will charge you HST on your purchase in Canadian dollars, the value in Canadian dollars, plus a brokerage fee of $10. So
Yeah.
they get us coming and going, I guess. But I think it's interesting to hear that yeah, it is affecting us in many different ways. And it's it's although the flip side of that is that Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound is a tourist destination and a lot of tourism. And I was talking to one of our hotel managers recently who was saying they've had the best summer ever, the best summer ever. And I said, well, where have people come from? He said two places, Quebec and the U.S. So okay, the world is changing, but I didn't expect that.
Yep. No, there definitely been a lot of Canadians due to this ongoing tariff war with the U.S. that have not gone to the States. So a lot more Canadians definitely, from a tourism perspective, staying in Canada, and we're blessed to live here in a great part of such a beautiful part of Canada, where we do attract, as you say, a number of people and even more Canadians than traditionally in the past. I think there's we'll look on it in the future, likely that this unfortunate situation we're facing right now with the U.S. has awakened Canadian industry and Canadians in general to make ourselves somewhat more self-sufficient and self-reliant on certain factors, because when you have things, but I mean ultimately we'd still want to get ourselves back to that luxury and privilege we had dealing with our partner and our ally to the south, because ultimately some of our sectors, the auto sector is a great example, for over 60 some years with the auto pact, is so integrated, and the supply chains are so integrated, where parts of an automobile will go back and forth something like 300 times before the car is eventually finished and put together, that you can't have some of this. It just doesn't make sense. There's no winner out of it, right? So ultimately, I think we're gonna we need to be smarter, because it has thrown everything up sort of on its end, but it's unfortunately resulted in increased costs for Canadians at this time too.
Yes, it's a new world. It's a new world, and it will be a very actually, in some ways, politically, I'm looking forward to this fall because we've got how shall I say it? We've got a new government coming in with new prime minister, and your
Well,
party coming, well, your party coming back with an enhanced shall I say verve. So I'm looking forward to seeing the I won't say the war of wits, but the repartee in the House of Commons.
it'll be definitely interesting, David. I'll just push back and correct you. It's not really a new government. This government's been in power for 10 years. We've had a new prime minister, and he's not that new. He's now 6 months into the job. He was made prime minister at the
Yeah.
start of March,
And
right?
on that note, Alex, we gotta end it because you made your political remark, and fair enough. I want to thank you, Alex, as always, for being a part of Politically Speaking, and you friends, thank you for joining us. Yes, we will talk again. I'm David Shearman. We'll see you again.